Well, welcome back to our next section of our study called Greeting Them from Afar. We're looking at Genesis chapter 23. Today's lesson is called Abraham's Possession. So in this section of verses 17 through 20, what we have basically here is the contract that was written between Ephron and Abraham. And it's interesting because it's worded very much like the contracts of that time and place. So it's basically just Moses taking the contract and putting it into Scripture. So it says that the field and the cave legally belonged to Abraham and his descendants. He owned that property, that was theirs forever. This would be the burial place for the patriarchs. Think about it. Sarah, Abraham, Rebekah, Leah, Jacob. They would all be buried there. Now, why is this important? Why is this inscripturated here? This land, this burial cave, really stood as a testimony of faith. Hebrews chapter 11 says that they all died in faith. So all these people, especially the men too, and the women, they all died in faith. They were seeking those promises of God. They had faith in the promises of God. They understood that the promised land was really more than just a plot of land. They knew that the promised land, the physical land, was not all that the promise entailed. That the promise was greater, that they greeted the fulfillment of everything from afar. How do we know this? Because Hebrews 11:16 says that. Here's what it says. They desired a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Think about it. So they were greeting these things from afar. They were looking at these things as if they were off in the distance. They were greeting them. Hey, they're seeing the promise. They can see the promise, but it's far away. And so even though Abraham owned a plot of land in the promised land, that was him greeting that promise from afar. But it wasn't even just the land itself, because anytime they can start taking the land, right? It's theirs. And so he greeted that from afar. And that's what we need to do. We don't always see all the promises happening. We don't see all the promises right up front. We tend to greet them from a distance, from afar. We don't, we might not have everything right away when we want it. Sometimes we have to wait. Sometimes the promises may not be fulfilled in us. Maybe it's our descendants. Maybe it's our family. So that speaks of leaving a legacy, of instructing our children, building something that's beyond us, creating things that will outlast us, that can't be accomplished in our lifetimes, that have to be passed on. We don't do that much in the world anymore. Most of the stuff is disposable. Most of the stuff we just throw away. We just pass on cash to our family members when we die. We're not leaving a legacy. We're not leaving something that's been started, that we started building, and then the next generation has to pick it up and carry it on. A lot of people used to do that with business. They would create a business and then pass it on to their families, and a lot of people don't do that anymore. That's a rare thing nowadays. To think that you would build something for your child to carry on and entrust them to carry it on and to continue building and creating something. It's not something a lot of people think about anymore, but that's exactly how these men and women in the past, and Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Jacob, and that's what they were thinking. They were thinking, it's not going to end with me. It's not going to end with the next generation. It's going to keep going. It's got to keep going. It has to keep going. That's the promise. So as you think about your own life and what you're doing and what you want to do with your time and what you're building, if you're building anything, you should be building, what are you going to pass on? Is it just cash? Is this money? Or is it like a ministry that you've built? Is it something that's going to spread the gospel? It's going to impact the world? Are you building something like that and able to pass it on to your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and seeing them come up in that and taking that over and flourishing in that. So think about those things. That's a challenge. That can hit at the heart of a lot of us. And what am I doing with my stuff? Am I building something for my kids? Am I building something for my grandkids, if I have them, or in the future when they come? So yeah, that's what Abraham and Sarah were doing, and that's what we need to do too.